So, this is Reverse Redaction, a discussion in which I, Judah McNeil, talk to Ford Suze about art. And I guess we talk about art, we talk about life, we talk about the world in a way that we try to reverse redaction, right? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, uncover stuff that's, people are trying to ignore maybe in works of art. Specifically, I think it looks like we're going to go in a film direction because we both, it's kind of a passion of both of ours. So, I think looking at story from a perspective that just tries to uncover things that may be overlooked or ignored intentionally or otherwise.
Okay, so, yeah. Ignored or even obfuscated, right? Like, or tried to unwind lies, maybe.
Stuff that's painted over, or
yeah. I guess not lies, but yeah, obfuscation. I like that word. Okay, so, today we are going to be talking about Prometheus. This is a Ridley Scott movie. He came back to pretty much take over the Alien franchise, right? And but it's a prequel. It's got Naomi, what's her name? Naomi Repace, Michael Fassbender, Guy Pearce, Idris Elba, and Logan Marshall. Oh yeah, it's got Charlize Theron too.
That's right. Yep.
Oh man, there's so much to talk about in this movie. A lot of great actors. What was your overall experience?
So I watched the movie on a flight when we were over on the other side of the world. We were going from India to Thailand. So my first experience with the movie was not ideal. Watching it on a plane. A lot of distractions, a lot of flight, announcement interruptions and stuff like that. My daughter was sitting next to me, so she was kind of young at the time. Younger. And so I was having to block the screen a few times when it was getting a little too heated, and especially we'll go ahead and do the spoiler warning now. If you haven't seen the film, I mean, it's pretty late for a spoiler warning. Most people have already made their opinions about this movie. This is my attempt to convince people that Prometheus deserves a rewatch and a reconsideration. So
it deserves a rewatch, or like to watch it in a different view, right?
Yeah, with a different view in mind. So after I watched it, like I really, the complaints most people have about that movie, I did not have them even when I watched it. Like I just and we can get into some of those in a minute, but most people's complaints about the movie are the characters are stupid, they do dumb stuff. Charlize Theron doesn't run to the left or the right, like when the ship is falling on her. The biologists and geologists do stupid stuff, like staying around looking at the snake that's going to kill them. So I'll get into those complaints in a minute. Okay. I think those are kind of superficial concerns that you can, if you're that picky about a movie, you can be that picky with any movie. Really, honestly, any movie. But we'll get into that in a second. So what hit me about the movie was just how weird it was for a mainstream sci-fi film when you start off with this odd shot of an engineer, the scene of an engineer being left on a planet, and he drinks this black ooze and then disintegrates. Like, what is going on? That's never explained. And most movies, I mean, if you think about Blade Runner, when it came out in theaters, I mean, that movie, all it was exposition. We talked about that last week. And eventually Ridley Scott got a chance to fix that in his director's cut and final cut. But I mean, how ballsy is that movie that starts off with this thing is never explained, and most people don't get it. So I was thinking about that scene, like, what did that mean? And so it was one of those movies that I had to go like search message boards and try to figure out if anybody had some, interesting things to say about it. Because most of the movie reviews were just talking about these superficial complaints about it being, a bad sci-fi movie. Like it's just, predictable and blah, blah, blah. And didn't make any sense. And characters' motivations were bad, blah, blah, blah. Plot holes. So the best thing I found was from this guy on LiveJournal. Cavalorn is his name. And he has wrote the most extensive analysis of Prometheus. And it's just perfect. It's maybe one of the best things I've ever read on the internet. Maybe the best film criticism I've ever read. Honestly, like it's that good. Like he takes it's simple when you really think about it, but he takes the word Prometheus and says, well, what does Prometheus mean? Who was Prometheus? Well, Prometheus was one of these old myths about the guy who created humanity, and in that myth, he gave humanity fire. He gave humanity fire, which is something that made the other gods mad. So what happens to him? He gets tied up to this cliff face, and every day this bird comes, rips open his side, eats his guts, and then his guts magically, because he's immortal. So this is his torment, right? So for giving humanity fire, giving humanity something that would, distinguish them and help them actually survive. So this is the suffering servant. That story predates Christ. So this is the suffering servant motif of a creator, being willing to go through ridiculous pain for his creation. Yeah. And so he points out how this image of a life giver having their side ripped open, or their abdomen ripped open, this repeats throughout the film. It starts off in a more metaphorical sense, where this guy eats the ooze and then he disintegrates. So he's willingly dying. Why is he willingly dying? And the black ooze decomposes him, so you see his genetic material, filtering out.
Time out. I did something wrong here. I can't hear you. Having some audio problems.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, let's see. Can you hear me?
Yep. Can't hear me?
You were on such a roll. Give me a second. Say something.
Check.
What in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing my voice meter is moving. Check. You should see it on your screen. Check.
Hello? Okay.
Hello.
You're back. What the heck? All right. I'm sorry, man. Where were you?
I don't know. Do you know where it cut out? Do you want me to start from the beginning?
Last thing I heard was Prometheus and the guts. That's the last I remember.
Okay, so I'll just kind of backtrack just a little bit. So Cavalorn, this guy on this LiveJournal post, he points out that Prometheus, the etymology of that name, is about the Greek god who created humankind, gave them fire, and for that the gods were mad at him because it gave him too much. Fire was the gift of the gods, shouldn't have been given to humans. So for providing for weak man, he was sentenced to an eternity of being hung on a cliff face, having a vulture come and rip his side out, eat his guts, and every day his guts would rehab, because he's kind of like Wolverine. He's got this immortal regeneration kind of deal. So every day he would have this, relive this torment. And so this kind of, this predates Christ, this motif of a suffering God servant who is like dying over and over for the people. So, that's the name of the movie, Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the beginning of this film, we have this picture. It's, Cavalorn points out that throughout the movie, this idea of a life giver getting their abdomen torn open is referenced. So the first time, it's not really the abdomen, it's actually the whole body. The engineer is at the top of the waterfall, drinks this black ooze, and his body decomposes. And you see his body decompose down to the subatomic level, down to DNA. You see DNA like filtering out into the water. So Cavalorn is saying that this is evidence that this black ooze is not some evil substance, but is actually, it just reacts with the character of the person that is using it. So you see at the beginning, he hesitates before he drinks it. Like, he looks up at the ship. He's kind of like, this is kind of a Christ moment. Like, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me, kind of thing. Yeah. So this, and later on, Charlize Theron's character says to her dad, says, you know, a king lives, a king dies. That's the natural order of things. Well, here's our king. Like, at the very beginning, this engineer, the way that engineers create life is by dying. So he drinks this, and his genetic material ends up becoming life on some planet. Whether it's Earth or not, we don't know, but that is the way that engineers create life. They have to die in order to create something new. And so, but the human desire to survive ends up compromising things. So when they walk into the black ooze room later on, she says, we've affected the atmosphere. I think Naomi's character says, you know, the atmosphere is changing. Well, you know, Cavalorn points out that something more is going on than just the actual physical atmosphere changing, that this ooze is reacting to the selfishness of humankind that only wants to survive. So, you know, it's not just the what's his name? Sorry, I'll have to cut this out. Charlize Theron's father, Guy Pearce's character. Pearce? Yeah. It's not just his character that has this will to survive, right? This is a human
Wayland,
sort of,
right?
Wayland, that's right. There's this selfish desire to live past someone's own lifespan, to not be willing to die for other people, that is changing the atmosphere in this room. And so when this black ooze starts breaking down human genetic material, it results in these savage, gluttonous, you know, life-preserving organisms. You know, they're all they're trying to do is just eat and live. Yeah. So when it touches the android, it doesn't do anything. Like, nothing happens, right? Like, the android is not like fully living, right? So when he infects the other scientist's water with it, you know, he actually asks him a question. He asks him a very interesting question.
The Tom Hardy lookalike,
right? That guy. And my mind's blanking on what his name is, but Dr. Shaw's significant other. So he asked him, like, what would you be willing to do, you know, to discover more about what's going on?
He basically gets consent, right?
He gets consent. That's right.
The guy says, I'd be willing to die.
I'd be willing to die. Yeah. So he's okay. So he drops the thing into the liquid and he drinks it. Well, when he wakes up the next day, he sees something in his eye. So, and I think it's kind of interesting because it's just a tiny little bit. So what is it infecting? Well, my thought is, and again, they never explain this. Right. My thought is that it interacts with some, you know, small organism that's inside his person. So you think about any sort of, like, you know, maybe has a virus or maybe it's a small cell. But, you know, what do cells do? Well, they're trying to fight to survive. Yeah. So, and he, you know, has sex with Naomi Repace's character that night. Right. And again, it's selfish, you know, comfort sex. They're not trying to create a new life. And so what do they end up impregnating? How does she end up getting her impregnated? Well, with this sort of selfish, short-term view of what human life is supposed to be, rather than a dying for other people sort of life. That's the creation of the xenomorph alien. So Cavalorn on this blog post points out the first time you see the suffering servant motif in an actual moment is in the room when they walk into the spaceship, where this black ooze is kept, and there's a picture of a Promethean alien, an engineer whose side is ripped open.
Yeah.
And there's something coming out of him, and so he actually screen grabs that. Like, again, like they don't shine a spotlight on this. Nobody, I think, comments on this, you know. Yeah. And this is heavy sci-fi. This is really deep sci-fi, because they're not handing it to you on a silver platter. they're expecting you. I mean, the biggest clue is the title of the film, Prometheus, right? So,
yeah.
and in that same room, so that's the one motif. You got this suffering servant God who's willing to die for his creation. And then on the other side, you have this weird thing. And they look up at this, see a mural of the xenomorph alien.
Right. He's like up like this. It looks like
right.
Christ. Yeah.
And so the creation of the xenomorph, this is like, there's a path being, put before you. You can die so that others can live, or you can try to preserve your life indefinitely, and you will create this thing. And, the thing that frustrates me about a lot of the complaints about this movie is, again, like, these people are stupid. Why would they do this? Well, because they live in a world in which the Alien movie never existed. Okay. Like this predates Alien. All right. Like they didn't have this, because think about it. Like when Sigourney Weaver encountered the alien, the chest buster scene, that is one of the most famous scenes in all of cinema history, that was a shock to them. Why was it a shock to them? Because they never saw it before. Right. Like they were experiencing that for the first time. Okay. We have experienced that moment.
I agree with you, but I mean, it's not like these were, early humans who'd never experienced any kind of like scientific danger.
Yeah. No, but if you're a naturalist, you're not a weakling. You're not a coward. A naturalist doesn't go to deepest, darkest Amazon rainforest and cower from every tarantula he sees. He picks the thing up. Okay, and this is the thing that is insane to me about that complaint, because the same thing everyone complains about this movie happens in Alien. They go hunting around the ship for a cat. Like, you're going to save a cat? I'm like, oh, what's happening? We saw a chest buster. I mean, they saw a chest buster. Yeah. And then they still go around the ship on real bumpadoo. No, like these are explorers. They're not cowards. And, we expect these explorers to be cowards. I don't understand that. That to me is
okay. Well, I kind of understand it, because the difference is in Alien, they set it up as these guys are goofballs, right? They're mostly soldiers. They're not, they're not hipster intelligentsia, right? They set them up as these like just Neanderthals. Whereas Prometheus sets these guys up. They're all supposed to be some sort, the ones that go on to the into the pyramid are supposed to be these high level intelligent scientists, right? They say that like or that's, I think that's sort of expected, but they don't show that. They end up being just really hard to connect with idiots.
Well, yeah, I think there's a commentary in that, though, because this is the problem. I mean, anybody who's worked in a corporate setting or in a government setting with people that are very high functioning has found the same attitude. And this is why this to me is more of a commentary on us as the audience, not, acknowledging reality. Like, there are CEOs. Okay, think about the CEO of Apple before Steve Jobs came back and took it over. Like, go back and read about that guy. Like, these people get into positions of power and they're idiots. Yeah, like, they're idiots. Sure. We've all dealt with this. Like, whether it's the church or the state or the business, like you wonder how these people get up through the ranks. These are the highest functioning members of society with high IQs, but they do stupid stuff that's self-defeating, that destroys the company, that, tanks whole bottom lines, that people can look at numbers and just be like, well, I think we should do this other thing. And everyone in the room is like, why? How did this guy get the decision-making capacity? So, but what informs that is Wayland's, this top-down idea of never being willing to die, never being willing to take the hit, always passing the buck. Yeah. So in that sort of system, who rises to the top? People who don't make the best decisions under pressure. Like Charlize Theron's character does not, people are expecting her to be like an action heroine. She's, and at the end of the movie, the desire for self-preservation kills itself. Sin eats itself. And so for me, like, I don't know. I've seen people do some dumb stuff. I've seen myself do some dumb stuff. So this is a commentary on people doing dumb stuff. Like, that's what I think the film is about. And it all stems from this desire for self-preservation at any cost.
I wouldn't say, dumb stuff maybe, but dumb stuff out of a sense of out of selfishness.
Yeah.
Right. And I think just as I think you always come down as far as our differences, you always come down on the side of a lesson learned, or the story taught, right? The message, the underlying theme. Whereas I tend to come down probably more like, the masses. I tend to come more down on the enjoyability of the action and the story, as much as the experience. And I guess my question to you is, who did you identify? Because this we talked a little bit about this when we talked about Blade Runner. Is I thought it was interesting what you said. You made some comment about how it sort of, most Hollywood movies want you to feel like the hero, and it kind of turns that on its head. And I feel like this movie kind of does the same thing. And I think you like that. I don't like that. I like to have a character that I identify with, and I want him to win, him or her, mostly him, because I'm him. But I want them to win. Who did you identify with? Naomi Repace in this movie?
Absolutely. I mean, I think she's phenomenal. And I find this movie, I'm surprised like more feminists don't like this movie. You want a strong female character, like she's it. And people complain, oh my gosh, this drives me nuts. People complain like, oh, she had a C-section, she's running around. Well, first of all, when she's running around, she's like been doubling over in pain. The entire time she's doubling over in pain. Second of all, it's the friggin' future. They can fly to another planet, for crying out loud. You think that they don't have a painkiller that she took right after that? She staples herself up.
She stabbed herself a couple of times with whatever that painkiller.
Yeah, that is the most inane criticism. Like you can suspend your disbelief at aliens and spaceships, but painkiller in the future. No, they don't have that. Like that's just lazy criticism right there.
Well, okay. Well, I think at the I think it's lazy criticism. I think all that is pretty petty, but I think what people, without knowing it, or maybe with knowing it, but what really bothers me, even as I agree with you, is that the movie tends to rely a lot on the writing for the flow of the action, and a lot of it feels like coincidence, right? So instead of her being foiled by her pain, like, because they need the narrative to proceed, she just continues to keep running, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I find the plot all makes sense in that, in terms of what is happening, the action that's happening. Like this is like a lot of people, there were some critics who complained about Avengers, for instance. They said, oh, we got this one scene where they repair a ship. Wow, that's riveting. When Iron Man has to like restart the engine. I'm like, I think that's great in an action movie where you actually have to do maintenance. I agree. I agree. And I felt like my difficulty with this movie, I really enjoyed it. First of all, I was watching it last night. And I was just going to fast forward through most of it, and I ended up just watching it through because it's a riveting movie. But the pace just does not let up, which is good, I think, for an action movie, for a sci-fi movie. But I thought there should have been more. I always talk about the forte dulce. Like, I thought there should have been more like slow, irritating moments rather than this like sexy moment all the time, Right. Well, see, yeah, okay. So the reason I brought up Avengers is because some people expected, they want a conventional action scene. So it's like when a movie when a movie does something unconventional, oh well, this is too boring. They're doing maintenance on a ship, or oh, this is unrealistic that they'd all be arguing. Okay, like what? You kind of have to take the movie on its own terms, I feel like. And I feel like in Prometheus, like you have to take the action and the pacing on its own terms. They're awakening something in this ship. They've awakened the xenomorph alien by means of this black ooze, and they've also awakened the engineers. And the engineers, and this is something Cavalorn hits on. Maybe we can touch on this in just a minute.
Yeah.
But the reason why the engineers are mad, the reason why this in particular engineer is mad, has something to do with humanity's treatment of one of their own. And so they say that, you know, the footage that they have of, you know, there's obviously some crisis that happens on the ship because they see these engineers running and in the replay, and one of them gets a head cut off. And so Cavallorn's theory is, and he, you know, did some watched some interview footage of Ridley Scott. In Ridley Scott's alternate universe here, Jesus Christ was one of the engineers. And so they sent Jesus, because it said it happened 2,000 years ago. This footage happened was about 2,000 years ago. Well, what happened about 2,000 years ago? Well, Christ was crucified. So, you know, Scott being, you know, kind of a Catholic background, a lot of Catholic sort of imagery in some of his work. This kind of does make sense. And so, you know,
Jesus Christ is a huge theme in this movie. Like going back and watching it, they say Jesus Christ a lot in this movie. Like, you know, use it as profanity, but you can see that it's very intentional, that it's placed periodically throughout the movie in the script.
So it's like Scott has taken up the Panspermia idea, you know, this idea that aliens created life on all the different planets, you know, so it's instead of God in the gaps, it's alien in the gaps, God of the gaps, it's alien of the gaps. So, you know, the engineers are those creators basically. And so when they send back one of their own, who would have been Jesus in this case, the Earth decided, no, you know, we don't need this. We don't need any sort of outside intervention. And that solidified our fate as selfish individuals. And so, and it looks like there's some sort of fight on the ship, you know, about what should be done. And some of the engineers are like maybe holding back, saying, no, we shouldn't interact. But, you know, why are they trying to fly to Earth? They're trying to fly to Earth to bring the black ooze. So, you know, what created life on Earth, you know, when a suffering, you know, creator dies so that others can live, this same stuff, when it's exposed to humans, is going to create the xenomorph alien, which will just eradicate all life. So it's a biological weapon that's also a biological, you know, it's kind of like nuclear fusion or fission, you know, like it can be used to create, it can also be used to destroy. So, you know, and there at the end, is very clear that that's what the alien's doing. Like,
I guess, yeah, I guess, although, I mean, we don't know for sure that the black stuff would have made a bunch of xenomorphs. I mean, like you said, it's kind of magic that it could have made. I mean, I'm sure it would have made some xenomorphs, but it didn't make a xenomorph out of Tom Hardy lookalike guy.
Well, but it did turn him. It did start to turn him, and the thing is, it's going to interact with the fundamental principle of a person. So it cuts through the BS. Like, if you're not willing, you know, he was willing to give himself, because he was walking towards her at the end again, you know, kind of Christ motif. He's got his arms out, and he's basically begging Charlize Theron just to light him up. And but even still, this thing was destroying him. The black ooze was destroying him, and he's not as bad a guy as Whelan is, you know, in terms of you know, being willing to die for other people. Like, but it was still eating him alive. So yeah, we do know what that stuff's going to do. It turned the one geologist guy into almost a xenomorph. I mean, it wasn't full. He wasn't able to replicate, but he comes back to the ship and just is an absolute madman. Like, I mean, he's a superhuman, and all he's doing is trying to kill. You know, it turned the worms that were in the dirt. Again, it never interacted with those worms before, but as soon as the humans walked in, when it touched those worms, it turned them into these disproportionately large snakes that were, I mean, almost indestructible. So, yeah, I mean, if it interacts with anything, what is the fundamental of lower life forms? What is the fundamental operating feature? Survival, eating. You know, you watch a bird. When I was working on the docks this summer, you see these herons. You know, they're walking around. These things eat nonstop. You know, pelican can eat 5 pounds of food a day or something like that. Think about that. Humans, I mean, we're lucky to fit a pound of it. And for, you know, how big we are, a bird, 5 pounds of food. Think about the metabolism of most creatures. It's gluttony. I mean, it's gluttony as a way of life.
Consumers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, a couple thoughts. My first thought was the alien at the beginning is the Christ, he is doing this act of, whatever he is. I feel like he is the outsider. I feel like it's hinting at some kind of, I mean, in my of course, they leave it up to your imagination, and I appreciate that. But in my imagination, there is a struggle, there is a disagreement within these alien life forms, or engineers or whatever they are, and he decides to. He sides on the side of humanity, and he like eats the stuff, and they didn't want him to, and that's why they're trying to clean up his mess or something like that.
Yeah, see, I kind of like the other theory about, humans went wrong at a certain point, because I get the feeling that, again, Ridley Scott says it doesn't have to be Earth, like that could be any inhabitable planet,
right?
That I just think this is the way that and that's why they call them engineers, because at the throughout they left these clues of the engineers pointing to the to a certain star system. So it's basically like, when you get the technological capacity, come visit us, guys. So I mean, that's a pretty kind thing to leave behind. Like they're encouraging their creation to come find them. So something must have changed in the course of the after being created willingly to we're going to destroy you now. Humans must have done something to merit destruction. And so and even if it's not Christ as the engineer, there's still, I mean, we have ample reason, and I think the movie is showing you this is why humans are going to be eradicated, because they're not willing to die now. And so and then we have the captain, and maybe the weakest characters there, like those other two guys are really never fleshed out, but they have this one moment where all three of them, another Christ motif, arms out, and I find that moment great. Like that's a
Idris Elba like crashes into the alien
right
ship.
That's a true moment of, and if the engineer had seen that, he would have maybe had well, okay, these guys are they're kind of getting it. I mean, they're willing to die so that others might live. I mean, it's a smaller version of dying so that others can be born.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about Lindelof, because this story was actually, from what I can tell, the story was actually started by Spaeth. It was a story about Christ, I think, originally.
Okay.
And then Lindelof came in. I think Spaeth left and Lindelof came in. And of course, to me, it's interesting because I think there was a lot of this tension in Lost between people that wanted it to be religious and Lindelof, who was like a diehard atheist.
Right.
And so anyways, I think he came in and said, yeah, this whole thing about Jesus being a 6 foot white guy, right, semi see-through white guy, I don't think he's gonna fly.
Right.
And turned it into more of a look at selfishness, and
which I think is the better artistic way to do it, because and Ridley Scott apparently even said that it's a little too on the nose to say that Jesus was an engineer, but right. I think you can get the same kind of idea that around that time period, humanity made a decision that in further entrenched short-term selfish design. Right. And and that can be applied to any time period. Like, we're still dealing with that. I mean, we as humans, as individuals, we as humans, as corporations, or as countries, or as religions, just making decisions that destroy ourselves in our lust for self-preservation. And so that, for me, just that sentence I just said, that's a perfect example of what happens to the geologist, what happens to the biologist, what happens to Wayland, what happens to Charlize Theron's character. Like, these are selfish people who are willing to throw other people under the bus, let other people die so that they can live. That's human evil in a nutshell.
What did you think about the dynamic between Charlize Theron, the captain, Charlize Theron's character, and David's character? What's his name? Fassbender's character. That the tension between the daughter and son, basically,
right?
Where I don't know if they ever do I don't know if she is an android or not. Um, I
Oh
guess
yeah,
she's not. I guess she's not. But
yeah. I wouldn't think she is, but
no, she's not. But the fact that she, the crew kind of thinks she's an android,
right,
and and her struggle with her android brother,
right. Well, and yeah, I think there's something even in that. Uh, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of layers to this movie. I mean, that's something
Yeah,
and a layer that I didn't really think about, but that they even call her that, or that they reference her being mechanical,
yeah,
and she is like she as a person, she has, that there's a temptation, I feel like, even in our culture, that women should look like her, should be this sort of like, you
mhm,
know, aggressive go-getter, like gonna get ahead, and she is ahead, and she is the captain. But
mhm.
really, it's Naomi's character who's the real strong female character
Yeah,
that really stands up and fights and thinks through in a crisis. And people take that for granted, like what it takes to think through in a crisis. And I don't think a mechanical person who's not in touch with their emotions, who's not in touch with thinking through larger life questions, Naomi Repace's character has a philosophy. She has not just a theology, but this hope that drives her forward. And Charlize Theron does not.
mhm.
She's driven by ambition and frustration and bitterness towards her dad. And when you're a strong female character that's whole operation is to beat your father, like
Mhm.
or to try
Replace
to
him.
yeah, replace him or prove something to him. Well,
Mhm.
you're not a feminist anymore because you're that's you want to talk about the patriarchy. That's the patriarchy in a nutshell, like
Right.
trying to prove something to your dad. So whereas with Naomi Rapace, she's looking at a larger father, quote unquote,
Mm.
something that's transcendent, or at least transcendent in comparison to her. She's lifting her eyes higher, and
Yeah.
that
It,
operates her.
again, it's this tension between religion and science. Right?
Yes, and right, and I feel like there's a lot there. Like, I mean, there's a lot in this
Mhm.
movie about this. This is a I feel like for 10 or 15 years there, I felt very alienated by the internet community where science won. Like just stop
Mhm.
Hawking just declared that science has won the battle between science and religion. It's like, and you've got all these agnostics and atheists who are just and rightfully frustrated with so many problems in not just the Christian, but just theological or religious treatment of inquiry.
Mhm.
Not just science, but just inquiry and ways of or arriving at epistemology. And there's a lot of rightful frustration on,
Mhm.
and I've a lot of times identified with the agnostic or the atheist. But this movie, I mean, Scott comes in with this very interesting faith and science sort of film that says, there's more to this. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is not the end of not the end of religious civilization. I hate to break it to you guys. Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot going on in this movie.
I feel like this movie could have it could have easily and maybe should have been longer. It again, it goes to me. It goes back to just trying to stuff so much
Right.
into. I think it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just does not let up.
Right.
And it's hard to track all this stuff when it's being thrown at you a million miles
Right.
an hour. I like there was a lot of things that caught my attention, and I'm like, oh, I really want to know more about this, and then they go to the next thing, and and here and here's this, and here's this, and because two things. One, this whole the whole theme of going back to our previous conversation, can androids be human,
Right.
and can they feel there's so many times in the movie where you see this look on Fassbender's face. It's like, well, I guess, but like, woe is me, I'm an android, you hate me, I wish you could really see who I really was,
Right.
this feeling of uh uh I don't know. It just like almost this. It's a lot like his sister in Charlize Theron's character, in which
Right.
he wants his creator. It's that whole dialogue where he says, what would you how would you feel if you realized your makers just made you, because he asked that guy,
Right.
you know, like, why did you make why, and how would you feel if they just said, your creators just said, we just made you because we could, you know? And he obviously feels disappointment.
Right. Yeah. And,
uh,
you know, I feel like they're getting at, you know, I think Blade Runner is a more, what is it, more focused or
Developed.
developed version of that question. But I
Yeah.
feel like Alien from the beginning has always had that, you know, attitude towards the android or the replicant, that you know, that it is the same question. Like the questions we have about our creators, the question that an android would have about us. And so, yeah, it, you know, it dips its toe into that area as well. And I feel like succinctly, you know, encapsulates some of this. I mean, the moment with the android and Wayland and the engineer together in this, I mean, you're getting both levels of that right at one moment. And, you know, Cavalorn over here, he points out that the creator of both, the ultimate creator, pulls off the head of the human's creation and then bashes Wayland's character with it, like uses it as a bludgeon, like use it. And I mean, that's an interesting metaphor there. That's an interesting metaphor. There's a lot in that.
Yeah, certainly.
You know, there are times I think, you know, the creator doesn't have to pick up the, you know, the tool of our creation to destroy us. We do it ourselves.
Our own devices.
Our own devices. Again, like, you know, one of my favorite sayings, and I don't really know who coined this, but it shows up a lot in George MacDonald's work, who is you know, fantasy author that kind of rebirthed the fantasy movement in this more Western motif, you know, using the fairy stories of Europe to kind of from a more Christian, you know, Judeo-Christian post-Greco-Roman way of viewing things philosophically and theologically, and which gave birth to all the fantasy that we consume today, Lord of the Rings, you know, C.S. Lewis's work, and by extension, you know, George R.R. Martin. So he has this idea, sin eats itself, you know, that comes up over and over again in George MacDonald's work, that we are our own worst enemy. We are the author of our own demise. And so that's huge in Prometheus, that idea.
I agree. And I think I mean, I never doubted that you would, but you basically won me over. And it really brought out a lot of good, but in the end, what I'm left with is there's just way too much packed in this. Now that's a good thing, right?
I love it. I love it. I love a movie that can be that. It's 2 hours and 4 minutes, like you said, 2 hours and 4 minutes. You think about how much more is crammed into this movie in a shorter period of time. And I prefer this to Blade Runner 2049, where it feels too languid. Like, and I still feel like, you know, you get to the end and it's just, you're still kind of like, yeah. I mean, I of course, after last week, as I said, I do like that movie a lot, and I would like to revisit it. But Prometheus wins for me just because it is more compact. And for me, I am willing, the things I'm willing to forgive, the things I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for, is if the idea, like you said, if the moral is something that, you know, when I come back to it and I say, man, I need to change this part of me, you know, and the movie does it for me. I don't want my legacy to be the xenomorph alien. You know, I don't want my kids to turn into this, you know, Wayland sort of, and you just see that attitude pervading capitalism, pervading nationalism, pervading culture, where it's just this self-interested, short-sighted, destroying the future, you know, strip mining attitude, you know, and just keeps coming back.
Well, then that's perfect segue into how we're going to end these discussions. How can we flip that and be into a positive statement? What can we be today? What are we called to be today out of this message of selfishness and sin eating itself?
Right. I think we're called to be Naomi Repace's character, who at the end, you know, picks up her cross again, you know, and keeps going. Like she's not stopping.
Right.
And
she doesn't want to go home to comfort. She doesn't, but
right.
So we just press on towards the goal.
We press on to the goal of, illumination, as Sean Connery's character says in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Just that it's the hunt. The real manifest destiny should not be going over and taking over every square inch of earth, and just for economic ends. Like, the real goal should not be becoming Wayland and becoming this, just a corporation that's going to eat all things in its path so that he can have eternal, human life. The real goal should be throwing a life on the line to find illumination, to connect with the transcendent, so she's trying to get answers. And that's what all discovery is. That's what science was supposed to be about. It's not just to, break things down to fundamentals so that we can manipulate the earth just to be, according to our whims. It's about, making a more orderly world on the one hand, but also just keeping our minds open to the possibilities, and so her character is a heroine of the highest order for me. And that the fact that she keeps going at the end, disemboweled and all, like, it's just, that's a true hero.
I love it, man. These are great conversations. I want to continue to, I wish we could keep talking about this. There's so much more to, not that a lot more, but there's other aspects I want to talk to you about, but alas, I've run out of time, and we'll continue these themes and looking at these things next week, as I think we're going to talk about Thor, right? Maybe.
Yeah. Thor. And do you think we can fit Thor and Stranger Things in?
Maybe we'll do two.
All right.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. Right. I got to get through Stranger Things myself, but all right. Well, let's go forward today in a Naomi Repace type fashion, unselfish and what would you call, like, what was the word for, like, undeterred, right?
Undeterred. Yeah, that's good. And just having a vision. I was thinking of that. There's that old proverb, where there's no vision, the people perish. And I think, she is a great example of someone who has vision, and a vision that's set on high things, not for lofty, self-important, desire to make a name for herself, but because it hits her at her heart. She's doing it from the heart. She has a vision.
Excellent. All right.